It's taken this week because we finally get open at Weatherigs this week, we hope, tomorrow. It's been a long year, hasn't it, for everybody? This time last year, I actually couldn't walk. It was absolutely, I was stuck in a chair, couldn't walk anywhere. And then for 3 months after that, I was walking around on crutches. I was up to the years, maybe past there, with drugs. One of the drugs made me stutter a lot. It's really strange, isn't it, when you take away that element to be able to talk, and I stuttered an awful lot. But one good thing that came from it was that I was able to tell stuttering jokes. So this day I was in Barnard Castle, and I walked into the bookies, and I said to the man behind the counter, he said, "You've backed a winner," and I went, "No." I said, he said, "You backed a horse each way," and I went, "No." He said, he said, "You backed a filly," and I went, he said, he said, "Look," he said, "here, have a tenner, just go." So I got this tenner, and I walked out to the bookies, and I saw a friend of mine walking down the road. He said, "What are you looking so happy about?" I said, "I've just been into the bookies to tell him I've just backed into his car, and he gave me a tenner." Last week, Ken alluded to my love for Newcastle United, and they kick off at 12 o'clock, so they need prayer. I love everything northeast, of course, coming from near the Tyne Bridge. I love watching George Gently, and I love watching Vera, just to have a little sly peek at the Tyne Bridge, or even the Angel of the North, God's own angel. But yet, Ken, you were right, there's a bit of rivalry between people from Sunderland and the people from Newcastle. I can tell jokes about Sunderland because I've got lots of friends and relatives who support Sunderland, and it's not by any coincidence that twice that Sunderland have won the cup, the first time the king abdicated and the second time the government resigned. I get the Newcastle Evening Chronicle and the Journal. I get it online now, of course, just to keep up to date with what's happening back in the northeast. And a couple of years ago, I got this story. It was about a copper in Newcastle, and he's walking along the front of the Tyne Bridge, and he sees somebody climbing up the top of the Tyne Bridge. And he thinks that's not right, because the coppers in Newcastle are really quick. It's not right in climbing up there, so he climbed up after him, and he got to the top, and he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going to jump off." He said, "Hold on a minute." He said, "You're not from round here, are you?" He said, "No." He said, I'm from Sunderland." He said, "What, you've come all the way to Newcastle from Sunderland to climb up to the top of the Tyne Bridge?" He said, "Why didn't you jump off the Queen Alexander Bridge in Sunderland?" He said, "Have you seen the queues?" This series of talks has been about people that do extraordinary things for God. Yeah. And I've got a few facts about the person that we're going to talk about today. He said, these are some of the quotes that he said. He said, "As a boy, I always wanted to be Robin Hood or John the Baptist." Quite a difference between the two. The John the Baptist part you probably fit in with. John the Baptist lived in the wilderness and he ate locusts and honey. So maybe he was alluding to that. He said, "Sitting down for dinner with 15 people brings me out in a sweat. I find skydiving really hard. In one jump, I broke my back and I still have nightmares about falling." He actually married a knight. Oh, yeah, Sauronite, that was, by the way. His real name is Edward, and he was born in Donegal in Northern Ireland, and he lived there until he was 4-year-old. And his father was Michael, and I'll not say the surname because it'll give it away. He was a very famous politician. His nickname, which he carries to this day, was given to him by his aunt when he was just a week old, because he was quite hairy. As a teenager, he had a black belt, second dan in karate. He was educated at Eton, like many of you there. Ken was educated at Eton, weren't you, Ken?
No, the only thing I've got is Eton.
All right. I'd just tell you, somebody came up to Ken, he said, excuse me, where did you get an accent like that? Ken said to him, Eton, old sausage. He said, you better stop eating old sausage. He's actually an Anglican, even though a lot of the stuff that you see on the internet about him says that he's a Catholic. Well, he's an Anglican. And he has 3 sons, Jesse, Huckleberry, and Marmaduke. Would you call your sons that? Anyway. He says that faith is his backbone, the backbone to what he believes in. Everything that he does, his faith has got a bearing on. He said, you can't keep God out, he's all around us, if we are just still enough to listen. The man is, of course, Bear Grylls. Have you got a little bit of something that you can diddle up on your little machine?
Mangrove jungles and stuff over the years. But you know what? I love the fact there's such a strong link between survival and life.
Bear Grylls is known around the world as an outdoor adventurer, survivalist, and the star of Discovery Channel's Man vs. Wild. Before becoming a celebrity, he served 3 years with the elite British Special Air Service, or SAS, where he honed his survival skills. But most are unaware of his deep love for God.
I always had a really natural faith as a kid, where I just kind of knew God existed, and it felt very free and pretty wild and natural, and it wasn't religious. But then I went to school, and suddenly it all became much more religious, and I kind of thought, oh, I don't like this, and it was all about church going and people telling you not to smoke behind the bike shed when you're age 12. I thought, if that's God, maybe I've got the whole kind of deal wrong, and I kind of ditched my faith.
Bear grew up on the Isle of Wight in England. He has always had a close-knit family, and he added a lot of friends along the way. In his newly released autobiography, Mud, Sweat and Tears, Bear explains how the death of a close friend brought him back to his faith.
I think age about 16, I lost my godfather, who was like my second father to me, who lived with us and we were super close. And totally out of blue, it was a real shock to me, and I remember just wanting to pray, but not knowing how to. And I remember sitting up the tree and saying a very simple prayer that said, will you be that friend to me that you were when I was like 5 and 6, and it felt natural. Amen. And that was actually the prayer of finding a faith. And I think for life now, it's still a continuing journey of not letting too much of the religious stuff and the kind of, cloud the heart of faith. But it's very simple. It's about being loved. It's about being forgiven. It's about finding home. And those are great things that all of us need.
Bear's faith has grown along with his thirst for adventure. At 23, he became one of the youngest people ever to scale Mount Everest. He relied on prayer and scripture throughout the dangerous and potentially deadly climb.
That's what I've always loved. That's what I've loved about high mountains, that it requires something more than just the physical. My faith was, as you said, it required kind of strength and like a backbone that sustained me a lot during those times where you're at your wit's end and you have nothing more to give.
Bear has had many more adventures since Everest, and his relationship with God has carried him through them all.
The journey has been, the faith has been the wildest ride. And, Jesus, the heart of Christian faith, was the wildest, most, radical guy who's ever come for us. He was always hanging out with the prostitutes and the tax collectors and having parties and banquets. And I found myself drawn to that character, just not the kind of fluff that we like to box as like religion. Now, I always get asked by kind of people difficult religious questions or whatever, and I just go, do you know what, sometimes I don't know, but I know I'm loved. that's the heart of Christianity, and that can be a lifetime journey to wade through all of the kind of, stuff to get to that. Well, the thing is, everyone wants adventure, and it's great. I hang out the whole time with kids and young scouts, and I never meet kids who don't want adventure. But life kind of tells us you've got to be more sensible, and you've got to do that, and we kind of grow out of our kids' selves, and life is a journey about not growing out of it, really. But the thing is, you don't have to climb Everest, or the adventures don't have to be super extreme for you to get the heart of what adventure is about. And for me, adventure's always been about the connection and the bonds you create with people when you're there. And you can have that anywhere. I take my kids on loads of adventures where we totally get that. And the joy for me is like climbing a little kind of thing, 50 foot high, it's nice and not too steep, and I do it with my 8-year-old, and we take a flask of tea and sit on a ledge halfway up and have some tea, and it's like, that's adventure and the magic of adventure right there in a nutshell.
Bear and his wife Shara are the parents of 3 energetic boys. So when he is done with his dirty work of survival, he is home. In the field, whether he is jumping from a great height or buried up to his neck, Bear has learned the hard lessons of faith.
I think kind of my faith through that journey has been an important thing. I found it hard to talk about for a long time, but I think now I look back and I realise that it takes a proud man to say he never needs any help, and I'm not that man now. And I love that great verse of the message that says, where you're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there's more of God.
Isn't that interesting that he brings up that faith isn't about theologians, it isn't about anything except feeling loved, feeling belonged. It's a very, very basic thing, isn't it? And I've never met anyone yet that doesn't want to feel loved or want to belong somewhere. Well, we belong to Jesus, don't we? And that's a very, very simplistic way of looking at your faith. And I think sometimes we complicate matters. And I thought that interview brought it out really, really strongly, that it's not about complicated things. It's about very, very simple things, that Jesus actually loves us. Bear also had some interesting things that happened in his life. He alluded there to when he broke his back doing a skydive, and he was laid up for some time. In between that and climbing Mount Everest, he met his wife. And do you know how he proposed? I thought it was really, really novel way to propose. He put the ring in the butt of his bum and offered it to her. Yeah, and she said yes. Amazing. The whole thing about faith, though, is back to the basics, isn't it? It's not about church. Church actually exists so that we can teach people about Jesus from the outside coming in. It's all about our heart condition, isn't it, and where we are with Jesus. It's not about just on a Sunday. I had a friend who was an Anglican clergyman, and he only ever worked on a Sunday. It's strange, isn't it? It's not about a Sunday, it's about your whole life, and it's about all the way through. It's interesting that Bear also, in 2009, became the youngest ever head scout in this country. The scout movement, actually going years ago, when he was a scout himself, he actually bit a kid in the Scouts, and they still let him remain. I can relate to that because I was in the Scouts for 2 weeks, and they barred me for fighting. I didn't bite anybody, but so he must have had a really, really understanding leader of the Scouts at that time. He went on to become, as I said, the Chief Scout in 2009, and the organisation was riddled with bad publicity about paedophilia and things like that. And very, very quickly he put it to rights. And now the Scout movement is where it ought to be, in the centre of society, teaching young kids about citizenship and a love for nature and things like that. Sorry, Buzz. So what do you do in your life that that can make a big difference? Next time we're going to talk about how we're going to take on Tyson Fury. Not literally, but that is the subject of the next talk. Begin next month, I think, Mike, isn't it? Thank you.